Hey, everybody. This is Erik. I'm a professional counselor who works with people in relationships. Today, we're going to talk about boundaries in relationship. And I'm excited about this talk because, well, I learned about boundaries about, I don't know, 35 years ago, 38 years ago, and it changed my life. I didn't know what I didn't know, and just a little bit of knowledge will go a long way. So I've drawn out a little diagram here to kind of describe things. This is me. This is little old me. And in relationship, I begin to have something beyond me and something that starts to go into what a better place to think about it is a mystery of where am I and where does that other person begin? Where do I end? Where do they begin? There's lots of books on boundaries. I will say I like a book called Facing Codependence by Pia Melody. That's Facing Codependence by Pia Melody. I think it gives the best description of what's going on. So I have a certain reality. It's not inclusive, but this is basically kind of a way to think about this. I have thoughts, I have my own thinking about things, and I have my own emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. Okay. So any true emotion will move me. If I have pain, it moves me to take my hand off like a hot burner or to move out of the situation. We're just really kind of guided by our own sense of pain. If I have joy, I want to share the experience with someone. If I have guilt, it moves me to not do that again, hopefully. If I have anger, it moves me to realize there's some injustice, there's something wrong. There may be someone stepping over boundaries. If I have sadness and sorrow, I grieve. I grieve. It moves me to grieve and to grieve that loss. If I have shame, it kind of moves me to hide and to cover up. If I'm fearful, it moves me to fight or to flight. So any true emotion moves you. A conscience is what kind of tells me what's right or wrong. It's how God can speak to me through my conscience. And that's part of my sense of being Erik. And then I have been given by God a free will to be able to choose things. That my sense of choosing what I want to do or not do is that it's God given, and it's so profound that it's God allows me to make all these wrong choices. But that's a truly loving relationship. There's no sense of control or trying to manipulate. So God doesn't manipulate me to do the right thing. Okay. And then I have my behavior. My behavior I'm responsible for. I'll be responsible for my thoughts, emotions, conscience, will, choice, and behavior. And responsible, I'm being real precise here. I can't control what happens outside of me, but I can have some choice as to what I do. Like there may be assaultive thoughts, like we talk about this in another video, but I don't have to believe them. Um, what is that sense of that choice to be able to do that? Well, it's boundaries, which we're going to be talking about. So then, of course, the other person has their own thinking on a matter. They have their own emotion. They have their own conscience, what is right or wrong for them. And they have their own will, choosing for what they want to do, and their own behavior. So that's our realities. Okay. So I'm going to use this concept of like this little bell shaped bubble or space, but that's what we use to describe boundaries. And sometimes boundaries are really wide and really have this sense of distance. Okay. So there's certain cultures that promote like more space, and you'll see it in terms of speaking with each other, emotionally distant. We use that phrase, emotionally distant. Um, in severe terms, it's I'm trying to keep on just describing things in terms of what health is, but there's mental challenges where we just really go the other extreme and we're really distant from people. We're really distant in terms of sharing any kind of emotion, etc. Okay. And another person has their sense of boundary space. So we could consider this kind of healthy in terms of these they're kind of like flexible though membranes that can go in and out, and they keep bad stuff out. Like we have cell biology that helps good things come in and bad things stay out. We have filtering systems. Well, this is what boundaries do. I'm not responsible for my friend's behavior. I can't think for my friend. I can't tell my friend how to think or how to be. I can't feel, well, I can feel some of my friend's emotion, but is that his or her emotion or is it my own? Okay. So that's a good question. We could call it shared emotion. And I'm using the idea of a friendship first because we'll eventually do the same schematic for couples, and that takes it up a level. If I feel too much of what the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, according to Erik, and I have thin boundaries, then I'm radiating that to my friend, and he or she may begin to get the sense of I'm controlling. Um, Now, say like they have really thin boundaries, and I'm just sharing my thoughts about something and assuming I'm more balanced and not pushy with my thoughts, just like they say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I think, well, this. If they have a poor or a boundary system, they're going to then assume that I'm telling them what to do. They may feel like I have to do what Erik wants when I might not have actually portrayed that. If they have a thicker boundary system, they may say, Erik, what do you think about this? I share it. And it's okay. They just understand it's just my thinking and it's not going to influence them so much. If I feel responsible for someone else's choice or behavior, that would be a boundary issue. That I would be too responsible, overly responsible, thinking, feeling. And so, of course, I'm going to get to try to get them to choose wisely. So, we could signify a thicker boundary system with a darker color here. Say, like my friend, let's make it a friend who's my wife now. She says, hey, I have an idea. I think we could do this for vacation. If I have too thick of boundaries, I might not really value what she's saying or even hearing what she's saying because I'm kind of in my own little world. Do I get my feelings hurt? You would think, oh, I could get my feelings hurt if I have such thick boundaries. Perhaps. But strangely enough, there are people that actually have thick boundary systems, but then they're also thin at the same time. Too thin, too thick. And it's like, how does that work? But there are some people that go, yeah, whatever. And they're just not that sensitive. They're just easygoing and that kind of thing. And of course, we could signify it where there's the relationship where there's such good, thick boundary system. And in this case, it depends on how you want to use the color. Maybe this is healthy for you, but let's say this is too thick um, and then too thin. So when we have too much closeness, there's the beginning of a diffusion. Okay. So we're really, really too close. We're in each other's space. We're thinking for each other. We could do a whole video on what it's like to have too thin of boundaries. But I'll give you kind of a a few samples of that. It'd be like if I'm cooking and then someone says, "Here, let me do this for you." You don't want those to burn. Aren't you going to add some seasoning to those? You can feel the energy that, am I cooking or are you cooking? Okay. Now, this happens in families. Let's turn it around a little bit. Say, like, I'm teaching someone how to cook and I have poor boundaries. I might be saying things like, "Oh no, turn on the stove. Yeah, okay, get that going. Oh no, don't do that. Here, let me do this." And so I grab it and start to do that. That would be like, how is that person ever going to learn when I'm so controlling and stepping over boundaries? And how will that child or teenager, whatever, feel a sense of, I did it myself? So let's say a more healthy or wiser teacher, first of all, assumes that it's okay to make mistakes. Also assumes that it's their cooking project, not mine. And then, depending on the age and how much guidance it's like a setting, I might say, "Hey, do you want some guidance or do you want to just kind of look at the recipe yourself?" If they go, "Oh, I want some guidance," it's like, "Okay, so this is what I do." Okay. And this is what I might say is, "This is how I do it. You can learn how I do it, but then you can do it however you want." I like to put oil in the pan. I like to get that hot first, and I like to add these spices. And so then I might say I I probably look at them every 10 minutes. Well, not 10 minutes, probably every 5 minutes. I'm using a hash brown metaphor, by the way, if you're wondering why, because 40 some years ago when we were cooking, my wife and I had a little argument about hash browns and flipping them. And I was offended that she flipped my hash browns. It's so funny. But it was a boundary thing. And we didn't really have the idea of a boundary thing because I didn't have the book and I didn't have the knowledge. I wasn't even studying to be a therapist. So that's stuck in my mind as we've now developed the skill to kind of let each other cook. If we were to say, "Hey, would you like help? Do you want me to watch these eggs for you? Do you want me to do that?" It's still boundary respectful because we're asking permission. We're asking, "Do you want help?" Now, if we are truly say we want the setting to be, "Can we cook this together?" It could be that we're in and out and we know the recipe by heart, and it's kind of like a dance. And there's no downside. It's our spaghetti we made together. And there's projects like that. So what this does is gives you a framework to begin to be able to understand things. It's practical when it comes to driving, like who's driving, is someone acting as the conscience while the other person's behind the wheel. That emotion of fear factor, person might be really feeling a lot of fear and the other person's fearless. Why? Because it's beginning to polarize, because they're like one driving being. Okay. Even though someone's hands are behind the wheel. You get the idea. When it comes to parenting, really important to understand different boundaries and how parents want to work together as a team rather than usurp each other's boundary space and then the poor person's confused. Having no boundaries or not good developed boundaries creates confusion. How does it create confusion? Well, say like you're with someone and they have poor boundaries and I don't like the word dump, but let's say we'll use those words dump. Are they dumping on me or am I letting them dump? See, that's the deal. So it's really a combination. But say like they dump all this stuff on me and then I kind of feel confused and kind of maybe overly emotional. Like, well, is this my problem or is their problem? And then I feel responsible. Should I fix them? Should I not? Should I distance? It gets confusing. Say like someone, and we've done some other videos on this, is that we feel responsible for their behavior. They're very skilled and not intentionally, but it's very unconsciously. It's a coping mechanism where they make us feel guilty for their behavior. And most common thing is you made me angry. Well, technically, no. If I was a saint and didn't have the passion of anger, then I might be able to endure a lot of um, mistreatment. But if I knew that they're going to mistreat me and this was a test, I probably would find a way to find some inner peace. Okay, so boundaries, I love them. I actually have a mug that says, "I love boundaries." I got it at a I don't think it's here, but it's a mug. I love boundaries. I almost thought on the back, I hope I have them, but that's a different story because these are things that happen over time. So eventually, let's talk about when boundaries are so beginning to diffuse and we feel like we're one person. Not really, but I tell you, Hollywood and movies don't really help. If we get our education on relationships from Hollywood movies, or I'll call out Hallmark movies, we're in trouble. Because most of them, it may feel good, but it's not practical. It doesn't really work like that way. It's fantasy. So we begin to have like this idea, you complete me. Well, was I that half of a person? It's like two halves of people coming together, trying to make one. And if we feel so broken in that sense, and we think our spouse is going to help us or fix us, it's kind of like having our umbilical cord in our hand, trying to plug into that other person, mama, mama. And the other person is going like, I don't feel there's something weird about this. What it creates is this poor person who's never really had that connection with parents. It creates more and more abandonment feelings because they don't realize that it's just too much energy there. What do? There's almost no way around it to just understand what's going on, and you're going to feel overly dependent, and that the boundaries are going to have this enmeshment. But no one's perfect. Until we have landed the plane many times, it's going to be bumpy. It just is until we get really skilled at this. And I'm still working on these myself. So what can happen is that all of a sudden we start to have polarization where one person might be doing all the thinking for the other person, and then the other person is not thinking as much. Yeah, we'll go back here. I need to make a slide that deals with emotion because really we could have one person 180% emotion and the other person not that emotional. And then we wonder, why is there not that much motivation in the other person? It's because I'm hogging up all the emotion. So I'm so emotional. The more emotional I go, the more thinking they get. And maybe the more thinking they get, the less thinking I have. Or I start to feel 180% of their conscience or 180% responsible for their behavior. So if you want to raise irresponsible children, just be overly responsible to them and do too much for them. Act as too much conscience. So I love this because it helps us understand, things from a systemic point of view. So what happens when boundaries are too thin or non-existent? We may create walls. And there's these walls of words, silence, geographical, where we'll just distance ourselves, fear, we walk on eggshells, and we just don't want to say the right thing because if it hurts you, it hurts me, and I don't want to hurt you. And so then I lose myself in the relationship. Or wall of anger. A wall of anger is where we fight basically because we feel like our boundaries are being stepped on. People are telling us how to think or saying things, no, I know what you're thinking, or you didn't apologize good enough, or you not taking responsible for your behavior as if I can make them. A wall of words is where we talk so much at someone, we don't really ever let them talk back, because there's a sense we don't have a good concept of seeing that other person as another person. They're kind of like enmeshed with me. So then the wall of words and the wall of silence is actually creating a distance. Say, like, people get really defensive when someone's just saying, you really hurt me at the park when you didn't acknowledge my birthday. And I have 10 defenses. Well, first of all, my defense is that sense that I'm feeling too much responsible for their life and their behavior. And I don't want to take responsibility for mine because that might cause some feeling. But if I'm in a good space and just feel my feelings, feel guilt, feel disappointed in myself, just apologize and just hear them, good things happen. So as we begin to wrap up here, so it's really important to know that we have boundaries are fluid. They're always moving and we're never really static. So some boundaries are thinner, some are going to be thicker. They're going to be moving, and they're going to be different for different relationships. And we'll talk about that, different boundaries amongst friends, amongst someone who's married, someone with children, church people. We just act differently, public figures. I will say a couple of things. The internet, it's like some boundaries, space is lost. People are putting way too much personal stuff, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Too much personal stuff about their life. It's interesting to think in terms of like reality TV and watching families with a video camera. Is that a poor boundaries? And we're watching someone else's family than really being with their own. What is pornography? It's so much worse than this, but what is it if it's not really poor boundaries? What is physical abuse in light of this, where we are going to make them think this way or make them behave? And so there's not a concept of boundaries. What is some forms of depression if we see it through a boundary space, that we have a controlling family, controlling parent? So the only way we know to do is to get back and stay away and to go into our own shell and repress. There's obviously other things going on, but you can see this through the light of boundaries, the lens of boundaries. So I like to conclude with a little bit of a solution here. So first of all, to develop better boundaries is to even just notice this. So read what you can on this, really begin to see things in terms of boundary space. There's different boundary spaces for different things. If you're in the military, they're going to tell you what to do, but you signed up for that to better our country, which I thank you for doing that. If you've served in the military, they don't have the same rights as civilians. It's when it comes to mental health, it's very interesting. Things that go on between a married man and a married woman have a different feel. And I'm not talking just sexual things, about information. I think even in a court of law, there were laws written where a person could be protected from having to testify against a family member. That's honoring the boundary space in marriage. This is always so fun to say, well, it would be totally inappropriate to have someone be taking your clothes and unbuttoning them if they're not a nurse. And a nurse, that would be inappropriate at a doctor's office. But if they're a nurse and a medic in a war zone, they're going to rip your clothes off to get to your heart to be able to save your life. So there's some behaviors that are always boundary crossing, but some of it really has to do with context. When you notice your boundaries being stepped on or crowded, you can move distant. And we do this naturally. We can just give ourselves a little bit of space by moving physically. We can also do this without moving our bodies, but just moving our emotion or our thinking more distant. Say, like there's people arguing or people talking about a topic that's contentious, and you love all these people, but you just don't want to be part of it. We kind of just move distant if we don't want to be involved in that. But say, like, someone's going through a really, really hard time and they're really beginning to cry or they're beginning to feel really bad and they need that emotional support, moving distant would actually feel harmful to them. And some people do this because they don't know how to process emotion or to feel their own, or they lose themselves in it. But the natural thing would be to move closer at appropriate levels, to be able to hear them more clearly, to be able to feel and kind of bear one another's burdens, as in the book of Galatians for those reading the Bible. But also it says each person should bear his own load. We can imagine the boundary. So it's not even about movement, but the boundary wall lining getting thicker or thinner. And this is a useful concept because as a therapist, I have limited, it sounds limited emotional connection, but it is. It's not the same as a family member. Limited sounds so limiting, but the reality is it is limited, but it can be really emotional to help someone get through a difficult time. And people are usually very grateful and thankful for that. But there's times when if I don't want to feel a lot of their emotion, and the reality is they need to feel their own feelings so that they're not just coming and dumping, then I need to make those thicker so that then I am letting them feel the feelings, say like from the recent drug relapse, so that they can feel the feelings to emotion, like move them towards a better life. But the role of codependency is to try, believe it or not, I say the role because the person doesn't want to feel feelings. It's the same thing that the addict struggles with. And so in attempt to feel their feelings, fix their feelings, they try to fix the feelings of the other person by kind of soaking them up like an emotional sponge. So then we feel wrung out and it's like we wring it out, we feel like a mess. This will teach us how not to do that. Okay. And last but not least, being able to say no to someone. And again, another video could be put together on that alone. Being able to say no and mean no and be okay with that and do not feel guilty is a really good thing. A child who's 2 years old, who's learning boundaries, that's when they say no. No, they don't want to be in the car seat. They don't want to eat that. I have a granddaughter, and it's cute to see her go through these developmental stages. And it's important. We all need to go through them. We can't really say yes to people before we learn to say no. Well, you take care. You have a great day in recovery. And if you've liked this video, it's okay to put a like there. I'm not going to ask for it so that I get algorithms or anything like that. But it helps me know if I'm on the right track. If you have questions, comments, we enjoy reading those as well. Take care and have a great day.